So, for the past few years, Turkey has basically been the main character in one of the wildest economic experiments in modern history. I mean, while the rest of the world zigged to fight inflation, Turkey, well, Turkey zagged hard. They decided to rewrite the rules of economics. So today, we're going to dive deep into this deliberate gamble and its absolutely devastating real-world consequences.
I want you to just imagine this for a second. You're in a supermarket in a major G20 country. You pick up the same exact stuff you bought just 3 days ago, cheese, eggs, the basics, but when you get to the checkout, the price has shot up 15%. And this isn't some hypothetical, right? This was the reality for millions of Turks. You're literally watching your savings just evaporate in real time. And that's where our story really begins.
So how on earth did this happen? Well, this wasn't an accident. It wasn't even just simple incompetence. It was a choice, a deliberate policy that was based on a very bizarre economic theory. Let's break down the central idea that really caused this whole crisis.
Okay, so to really get what happened, you've got to understand two totally opposite playbooks. Standard, textbook economics tells you that when inflation is getting too hot, you raise interest rates. It's like tapping the brakes on the economy. It can be painful, yeah, but it works. But Turkey's leadership, they argued the exact opposite. They claimed that high interest rates actually cause inflation, and that by cutting them, they could solve the problem.
You know, this one analogy from our source material just nails how insane this policy looked to pretty much the rest of the world. Instead of hitting the brakes as inflation was careening downhill, the government decided to cut the brake lines, somehow believing it would magically fix the problem. So, you gotta ask, why on earth would they do this? Well, the logic, it wasn't economic. It was purely political. See, Turkey's economy had become addicted to growth that was fueled by cheap credit, especially for its huge construction industry. Raising interest rates would have caused a recession, and that's like a political death sentence before a big election. So they kept the taps wide open, slashing rates from 19% all the way down to 8.5%, even while inflation was absolutely soaring.
So what happened next? Well, the immediate result was completely predictable and absolutely catastrophic. With inflation skyrocketing way beyond what you could earn in a bank account, just holding on to Turkish lira meant you were losing money every single day. So what did everyone do? Citizens, businesses, you name it, they all started dumping the lira as fast as they possibly could.
I mean, just look at these numbers. They're staggering. And notice how it just accelerates after 2021. That's right when the rate-cutting experiment really went into overdrive. The lira went into an absolute freefall. This wasn't just the currency getting a little weaker, no. This was a full-blown collapse. And here's why that matters so much. For a country like Turkey, which has to buy most of its energy, machinery, and raw materials using dollars and euros, a collapsing currency, it's basically a death sentence for stable prices. All of a sudden, the cost of fuel, electricity, and basic imported goods just exploded. And that brings us right back to that supermarket and that 15% price hike on cheese and eggs.
And as this whole crisis got deeper, something really fundamental started to just break. And that was trust. Trust in the official data. The numbers themselves became a battleground, creating two totally different realities for the government on one side and its citizens on the other.
And right here, you can see that split in black and white. The official government agency, called TÜİK, would come out and report an annual inflation rate of, let's say, 64%. But then an independent group of academics, called ENOG, who were tracking prices in real time, would say, actually, it's more like 129%. Look, this isn't a rounding error. We're talking about two different universes of data. And for regular people on the street, ENOG's numbers just felt a lot closer to the truth.
And this just perfectly illustrates that disconnect. Forget about complex government statistics. The CIMIT index, the price of a simple, beloved sesame bagel that people buy every day, it tells the whole story. A 500% increase in just 3 years. It doesn't matter what the official spreadsheets claimed. The street food doesn't lie. So, eventually, after the 2023 elections, something had to give. The economy was on the brink, foreign cash was running out, and reality finally forced a change. The government pulled a dramatic U-turn. They brought in a whole new economic team with one job: stop the bleeding, no matter how painful the medicine was going to be.
And wow, here is the medicine. That new team jacked up interest rates from that low of 8.5% all the way up to a staggering 50%. This wasn't just a course correction. This was a complete 180-degree reversal of that whole unorthodox experiment. They finally slammed on the brakes. Hard.
So what does a 50% interest rate actually feel like for a normal person or a business? Well, it's like monetary strangulation. Your credit card debt becomes impossible. Getting a loan to expand your business or buy a home becomes a distant dream. It's a necessary evil, really, but it's an incredibly painful process that's designed to kill inflation by choking off all economic activity.
Now, during the worst of the crisis, the government also cooked up this really bizarre and incredibly risky plan called KKM. It was a desperate attempt to stop people from dumping lira for dollars. Here's how it worked. It basically offered you a zero-risk bet. You get paid interest, and if the lira falls, the government pays you the difference out of its own pocket. It kind of worked to stop the panic for a bit, but it created this massive, ticking time bomb on the state's budget.
And this chaos, it wasn't just in finance. It spilled over into everyday life. The government tried to cap rent increases at 25% a year. But when real inflation is over 100%, a well-meaning law like that just backfires spectacularly. It basically turned the rental market into a war zone, pitting landlords against tenants in this desperate, ugly battle for survival.
So you've got this perfect storm, right? A currency crisis, a cost of living crisis, a social crisis. At some point, all that economic pain has to have a political price tag. And the Turkish people, well, they were about to deliver their verdict.
You know, the damage wasn't just about money. It was generational. The most valuable thing any country has is its people. And Turkey began losing its best and brightest. We're talking doctors, engineers, scientists, the very people you need to build a future, leaving in droves for a stable life somewhere else. The country was literally exporting its own future.
You know, there's this classic saying in Turkish politics that just captures this perfectly. It basically means that when people can't afford to put food on the table, nothing else really matters. At the end of the day, the economy always has the final say.
And sure enough, on March 31st, 2024, that empty pot proved it was more powerful than politics. In the local elections, the ruling party suffered a historic, crushing defeat. It was a clear referendum on the economy, driven by millions of pensioners and everyday citizens whose savings and lives had just been pulverized.
So, when you step back and look at this whole thing, what's the real lesson from Turkey's self-inflicted economic wound? It's really a powerful, cautionary tale about what happens when politics just decides to ignore basic economic reality.
At the end of the day, the lesson is this. Inflation is never just a number on a chart. It's an invisible thief. It steals your past by making your savings worthless. It steals your present by making daily life unaffordable. And it steals your future by completely destroying trust in your country's institutions.
So today, Turkey's going through some incredibly painful surgery. Kind of like surgery without anesthesia, to fix a wound it gave itself. The new policies are logical, they're orthodox, and financial markets are giving them a thumbs up. But the real question, the one that really matters, is this. After years of chaos and broken promises, can the government regain the trust of its own people? That is the battle that's going to determine Turkey's future.